It was a quiet night. The street was empty, and the world seemed to be asleep. Only the sound of the wind touched the lonely house at the corner. Inside, the man sat in silence, reading a book with half a mind, when suddenly, a sharp knock broke the peace. At first he thought it was just the wind shaking the old wooden door. But then, the knock came again, louder, slower, heavy, as if someone was struggling. The man stood up carefully. Who could be out there at this hour? Midnight was no time for visitors. He walked to the door, his steps uncertain. A strange feeling crept into his chest, half fear, half curiosity. When he opened the door, his breath caught in his throat. There, on the doorstep, lay a figure. A woman. No, not a woman. Her skin was pale, almost silver, glowing faintly under the moonlight. Her body looked thin, starved, almost broken. She wore no clothes of this world, only torn fabric that clung to her like rags. Her hair was long, dark, tangled, but her face was unforgettable. Her eyes, they were not human, large, bright, shining like deep pools of stars. Eyes that looked at him not with anger or danger, but with desperate need. The man's first instinct was to step back. This was wrong. This was impossible. An alien, here, on his doorstep. His heart raced, his hands shook. But then the figure tried to speak. Her lips moved, her voice was dry, broken, weak, like sand blowing in the desert. Only one word came out, soft as a whisper. Family. And then she collapsed, her body falling against the wooden frame of the door. The man froze. His mind shouted at him, close the door, call someone, stay away. But his heart whispered something else. This creature was not dangerous. She was dying, alone, starving, and for some reason, she had come to him. Slowly, he bent down. He could feel her skin. It was cold, trembling, fragile like thin glass. Her thing was shallow, each breath a fight for life. He hesitated, looking at her strange features again. She was not human, but there was something human in her suffering. He lifted her carefully and brought her inside. She was lighter than he expected, almost weightless. He placed her on the couch, unsure of what to do next. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring. His living room, once so normal, now felt like another world. An alien woman lay in his house. Her chest rose and fell slowly, painfully. He went to the kitchen, brought water in a glass and tried to help her drink. At first, she didn't move, but then her lips parted slightly and she sipped the water like it was the last thing keeping her alive. Her eyes opened again, meeting his. For the first time, he saw something more than desperation in them. Gratitude, relief, a silent plea. Who are you? He asked softly, though he knew she might not understand. Her mouth moved again. He leaned closer. Hungry, she whispered. The man rushed back, brought a piece of bread, simple food from his table. She reached out with shaking hands, her fingers long and thin, almost delicate. She ate like someone who hadn't tasted food in days. Every bite looked painful, but also full of relief. As she ate, he studied her. Her skin seemed to glow stronger now, like her body was slowly finding strength again. Her eyes closed for a moment, then opened, softer this time. Why, here? The man asked, still in shock. She looked at him, her lips trembling. She lifted one hand, weak but determined, and touched his chest. Family, she whispered again. The word echoed in his ears. It made no sense. He was alone in this world, no wife, no children, no family close by. And now this alien woman was calling him family? He sat back, his heart pounding. Questions filled his mind. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why had she come to him? Was she dangerous, or was she running from something even worse? The silence of the house felt heavy. Outside, the wind howled. Yes, but inside, all he could hear was her slow breathing. She was fragile, broken, but there was something about her presence that pulled him in. He should have been afraid. He should have pushed her out. But instead, he felt a strange sense of duty. She had come to him. She had trusted him, even in her weakest moment. He could not turn away. The man sat beside her, watching as she drifted into sleep. Her face looked calmer now, as if she felt safe here. For a moment, she almost looked human. But deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. A stranger had arrived at his door, a being from another world, carrying secrets he could not yet imagine. And by letting her in, he had opened the door not just to his house, but to something far greater, something dangerous, something that would change his life forever. The night stretched on, silent and cold, but in the small living room of that lonely house, a story had begun. A story of fear, a story of hope, and above all, a story of family. The night passed slowly, and the man barely slept. Every small sound in the house made him open his eyes, afraid yet curious. He kept glancing at the couch where the alien woman rested. Her breathing was uneven, sometimes quiet, sometimes sharp, as though every breath was a battle. The first light of morning touched the windows. He rose carefully and walked closer. She was still there, real, not a dream. Her skin looked less pale now, glowing faintly like morning frost, but she still appeared weak, fragile, almost like glass that could break at the smallest touch. He placed a blanket over her, though he wasn't sure if she even felt cold like humans did. For a long while, he just stood and watched. She was strange, otherworldly, yet something about her made her look vulnerable. Then her eyes opened. Large, star-filled eyes met his, and the man froze. He expected fear or anger, but instead, her gaze held something else, recognition, as if she remembered him, though they had never met. She tried to speak, but her lips trembled, and only a broken sound came out. The man rushed to bring water again. This time, she drank slowly, steadying herself. When she finally spoke, the word was faint but clear. Safe? The man's heart jumped. She understood him, or at least enough to ask this one question. Yes, he answered softly. You are safe here. She looked around the room, her expression cautious, as though every corner might hide danger. Her hand gripped the blanket tightly, her body tense. She didn't trust the walls of this house, but she wanted to trust him. The man sat down in the chair across from her. He kept his voice gentle, slow, like speaking to a child. Who are you? He asked. She didn't answer at first. She stared at the floor, her thin fingers tracing the fabric of the blanket as if searching for words. Finally, she touched her chest lightly. Lyra, she whispered. The name hung in the air like a secret. Lyra, the man repeated softly, testing the sound. She gave the smallest nod, her eyes flickering with relief. He introduced himself too, saying his name slowly so she could understand. When she tried to repeat it, her voice cracked, but the effort felt like trust. He noticed then how fragile she truly was. Her wrists were thin, her skin stretched over sharp bones, as if she hadn't eaten properly in weeks. Hunger had left her body broken. Food, he said gently, showing her a piece of bread. Eat. Lyra hesitated. Her eyes studied the bread as though it were strange. Then carefully she took it. She chewed slowly, her face showing discomfort. Clearly human food was not natural for her, but hunger won, and she finished every bite. The man fetched more, testing with fruits, vegetables, small pieces at a time. She accepted some, refused others. Still, every bit of food gave her a little more life, a little more color in her skin. When she finished, she leaned back against the couch, her body trembling less than before. Her voice returned, still broken but stronger. Run, she whispered. Hide. The man frowned. Hide from who? Her eyes darkened. She looked at the window, her body tense again, as if the outside world was dangerous. She raised her hand and made a motion like claws tearing into flesh. Hunters, she whispered. The word sent a chill through him. Hunters? From where? From her world? Or from space itself? He wanted to ask, but her strength was fading again. She shut her eyes tight, her chest rising and falling with effort. He sat back, troubled. Who was chasing her? Why had she come here, to him, of all people? And why did she call him family? Hours passed. The man tried to distract himself with normal things, making coffee, reading, but his eyes always returned to her. The alien woman in his living room was no dream. She was real, fragile, and now his responsibility. In the afternoon, she woke again, and this time she tried to stand. Her legs shook violently, and she nearly fell. The man rushed to help her, holding her steady. She flinched at his touch at first, but then leaned on him, too weak to resist. Slow, he said gently. You're not strong yet. Her eyes met his again, and this time there was no fear, only trust. He helped her take a few small steps. She seemed determined, as if walking was a fight she refused to lose. Each step looked painful, but she pushed forward. When she finally sat back on the couch, she whispered something again. Family. The word returned, stronger than before. This time, it wasn't just a whisper of weakness. It was a choice. The man didn't know why she said it. He didn't understand her meaning, but hearing it stirred something inside him. For years, he had been alone. Now, a fragile stranger from another world was looking at him as though he was her only hope. As night returns, the house grew silent again. But the silence felt different now, not empty, not lonely. Somewhere deep inside, he knew life would never return to what it was before. Lyra was here. She was fragile, hunted, and full of secrets, but she had chosen him, and whether he liked it or not, his life was now tied to hers. The second night was quieter. The man stayed awake, listening to the soft rhythm of the alien woman's breathing. She slept more peacefully now, her body no longer shaking with hunger. Still, there was unease in the air. Every time the wind tapped against the window, he found himself looking outside, half expecting shadows to be waiting. By morning, Lyra opened her eyes again. This time, there was more awareness in her gaze. The faint silver glow in her skin seemed steadier, like her body was slowly healing. She sat up slowly, her thin hands gripping the edge of the couch. The man brought her a bowl of fruit, cutting it into smaller pieces. She studied it carefully, then began to eat. This time, there was less hesitation. She was learning what food she could accept. As she ate, he tried again to speak. His voice was calm, gentle. "Where are you from?" he asked. She paused. Her lips moved, but the words were broken. "Far. Home. Gone." "Gone?" he repeated. Her eyes grew distant, full of sorrow. She lifted her hand and pointed upward, toward the sky beyond the roof. Then she clenched her fist and pressed it to her chest, her face tightening with grief. The man understood enough. Her home was gone, destroyed. She was alone. He felt a pang of sympathy. She wasn't just a stranger. She was a survivor. Later, while she rested, he brought out a notebook. He drew a circle for Earth, then another circle beside it. Pointing at himself, he tapped the Earth drawing. Then he pointed at her, raising his eyebrows. Lyra's eyes lit with understanding. She leaned forward, took the pencil in her long fingers, and with shaky strokes, drew a shattered circle. Cracks ran through it, breaking it apart. She tapped it once. Her voice trembled. Home. Broken. The man's chest tightened. Her planet was gone, destroyed beyond repair, and she had come here, not by chance, but by desperation. When she set the pencil down, her hand brushed his for just a moment. A small touch, accidental perhaps, but her eyes stayed locked on his. For the first time, there was no fear in them, only connection. She tried another word, testing her voice. "Safe? Here?" The man nodded firmly. "Yes, you are safe here," she repeated softly, almost like a child learning a new word. Safe. The sound of it seemed to calm her. She leaned back, her shoulders relaxing. Through the day, they found small ways to bridge the silence. He taught her simple words: water, food, house. She repeated them, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes perfectly, her voice growing steadier each time. Every word she learned made her smile faintly, as if each sound was a step away from fear and closer to belonging. But even in moments of quiet learning, there was tension beneath. She often glanced at the window, her body stiffening at noises outside. At dusk, when shadows stretched across the floor, she whispered one word again. Hunters. The man didn't press her for details. He could see the fear in her eyes when she spoke of them. Whatever those hunters were, they had taken everything from her, and now she feared they would come here. That night, while the world outside settled into darkness, she sat beside him on the couch. Her thin form looked fragile under the blanket, but her eyes were steady. She turned toward him and said one more word. Family. He blinked, uncertain. Why, family? She pressed her hand gently against his chest. Her voice broke but carried strength. Alone. No more. The words were simple, but their weight pressed against him. She had lost her people, her home, everything she once knew. Yet here, in his small, dull house, she had found something she desperately needed. Not just food, not just shelter, but connection. The man swallowed hard, not knowing what to say. He had lived alone for so long. Family was just a memory, something he had locked away. And now this alien, fragile, hunted, and broken, was giving that word back to him. Before he could respond, a noise shattered the quiet. A low hum outside, distant but unnatural. The man's eyes darted to the window. Lyra's body tensed instantly, her eyes wide with panic. She whispered one word, her voice trembling. Them. The man's heart raced. He stood quickly, moving to the window. Far across the dark sky, faint lights blinked, red, moving slowly, searching. Hunters. He turned back to Lyra. She was trembling again, clutching the blanket tightly, her eyes begging him for safety. Without thinking, he placed his hand over hers. "You are safe here," he repeated firmly. But deep inside, he wasn't sure if that was true. The connection between them had grown. She trusted him. She called him family. And now, danger was drawing closer. The night air was heavy, pressing against the house like an unseen weight. The man stood by the window long after the strange red lights had faded from the sky. His heart still raced, his mind full of questions. Who were they? Why were they here? And how long before they found his home? Behind him, Lyra sat curled on the couch, her silver glow faint but trembling. Her wide eyes never left the window. Even when the night grew quiet again, she did not relax. She whispered the same word again, voice sharp with fear. "Hunters." The man turned toward her, uneasy. "Who are they? What do they want?" But she only shook her head, clutching the blanket tighter around her fragile body. Her lips trembled, but no clear words followed. It was as though speaking too much about them would summon them instantly. The man sat beside her, trying to keep his voice steady. "You're safe here." But Lyra only whispered again. "No, not safe." Those words hung in the air like cold smoke. The next morning, sunlight streamed in, but it did not bring peace. The man left the house briefly to fetch supplies from the corner store. Food, medicine, anything that might help her. He kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting to see strange figures watching him. When he returned, he found Lyra standing near the back door. Her body was trembling, but her eyes were fixed on the garden outside. He followed her gaze and saw it, footprints in the dirt. They were not his, they were not hers. The prints were long, sharp, and oddly shaped, almost like claws pressing into the ground. The man's stomach turned cold. Someone, or something, had been here. Lyra whispered, almost breathless. Look." She pointed at the prints with a shaking hand. "Hunters. Close." He forced himself to remain calm. "It could be an animal," he said, though even as the words left his mouth, he didn't believe them. "No animal," Lyra replied, her voice firm this time. "Them." Her eyes held no doubt. Later, as evening approached, the man tried to distract her with small lessons. He pointed at objects in the house, naming them slowly. She repeated each word with growing skill. Table, chair, window, book. It seemed to calm her, as if learning human words built a bridge between their worlds. But whenever shadows moved outside, her eyes darted toward the door, and her voice would fall silent. At one point, she rolled up her sleeve to scratch at her arm. The man froze. Across her pale skin, near her shoulder, were deep scars, dark, jagged lines that looked burned into her flesh. "What happened?" he asked quietly. She looked at the scars, then at him, her face twisted with pain and anger. She lifted her hand, mimed claws raking across her arm, then shook her head. "Hunters," she whispered. "Mark." His chest tightened. They had hurt her before. These hunters had left their mark on her body. He imagined her running, starving, collapsing at his doorstep after escaping them. And now they were near. That night, the house no longer felt safe. The man kept the lights off, moving carefully so no glow spilled from the windows. Lyra sat close to him, her thin body tense, every muscle ready to flee. Then it happened. A sound outside. Not the wind, not an animal. A slow scrape against the wall. The man's blood ran cold. He moved silently to the window and pulled the curtain just enough to look. In the darkness, he saw shadows moving between the trees. Tall, thin shapes gliding silently. Their eyes glowed faintly, like embers in the night. His breath caught. He stepped back quickly, but not before one of the shapes tilted its head, as though it had sensed him watching. Behind him, Lyra's hand clutched his arm. Her whisper was sharp, urgent. "They find us." The man's thoughts raced. He had no weapons, no plan. Only an alien woman who trusted him and creatures outside who wanted her. The scraping sound moved closer, then stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It meant they were waiting. Lyra pressed her forehead against his shoulder, whispering in broken words. They never stop. Follow. Always. Her voice trembled, but her eyes burned with something stronger than fear, determination. She had been hunted for so long, yet she was still alive. She was still fighting. The man realized something then. If he didn't act, they would come inside. And if they did, neither of them would survive. He pulled her gently toward the center of the room, away from the windows. His voice was low, steady. We'll stay quiet. We'll wait them out. She nodded, though her hands still shook. Hours passed in silence. The hunters never entered, but the air outside pulsed with their presence. At times, faint whispers echoed, strange sounds that made his skin crawl. When dawn finally broke, the shadows were gone. The footprints in the garden were fresh again, deeper this time. They had circled the house all night. Lyra stared at them, her face pale with fear. But when she looked at him, her voice was steady. "Family," she whispered. "You fight with me?" The man's chest tightened. He had never asked for this, never imagined protecting someone from creatures beyond the stars. But when he looked into her eyes, he knew his answer. "Yes," he said firmly, "I'll fight with you." For the first time since she arrived, Lyra smiled faintly. It was weak, fragile, but real. The hunters were closer than ever. Their threat hung over the house like a storm waiting to break. But in that small moment, in the fragile bond they shared, something stronger was born. Not just fear. Hope. The man did not sleep the next night. He sat near the front door, every muscle tense, listening for the slightest sound. Lyra sat close to him, her silver glow faint in the dark, her body wrapped in the blanket like fragile armor. The silence felt heavy, too heavy. Then it broke. A sharp thud came against the wall, then another, the sound of claws dragging slowly, deliberately across the wood. The man's breath quickened. He looked at Lyra. Her eyes were wide, her lips trembling as she whispered one word. "Hunters." The scraping sound moved along the wall, circling the house. The man reached for a heavy flashlight on the table, the closest thing to a weapon he had. It felt useless in his hand, but he gripped it tightly anyway. Suddenly, glass shattered. The kitchen window exploded inward, shards raining across the floor. A shadow slipped inside, tall and thin, its movements smooth and inhuman. Its glowing eyes locked on Lyra immediately. The man's instincts took over. He shouted, swinging the flashlight hard. The metal cracked against the creature's face with a hollow thud. It staggered back but didn't fall. A low hiss rattled from its throat. "Go!" the man shouted. Lyra stumbled to her feet. She was weak, but the sight of the creature gave her strength born from terror. She ran toward the back door, the man close behind her. Another crash echoed. A second shadow was breaking in through the living room window. The house was no longer safe. The man grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her outside into the cold night. The garden stretched dark around them, but the hunters were already moving, shapes gliding between the trees, circling like wolves. "Run!" he shouted again. Lyra's bare feet struck the dirt, her breath sharp and quick. She moved clumsily but fast, fear carrying her forward. The man stayed beside her, his heart pounding louder than his footsteps. Behind them came the sound of pursuit. Heavy, unnatural steps. The hunters did not stumble. They did not tire. The pair ran across the open field beyond the house. The moonlight lit their path faintly, but also revealed their fleeing figures to the shadows behind them. "Faster!" the man urged, though he could feel Lyra's strength fading. Her breaths came ragged, her legs trembling with every step. She had survived starvation, but she was no warrior. One of the hunters closed in, its long limbs carrying it forward like a predator closing on prey. The man turned, swinging the flashlight again. He struck its arm, enough to make it falter for a heartbeat, but another shadow appeared from the side. They were surrounded. The man's chest tightened with panic, but then he saw it, a gap in the trees ahead, a small dirt path leading toward the old abandoned barn at the edge of the field. "This way," he shouted, pulling Lyra with him. They stumbled down the path, branches whipping against their faces. The barn loomed ahead, its roof broken, its doors hanging loose. It was no fortress, but it was shelter. They slipped inside, slamming the heavy wooden door behind them. The man braced it with an old beam, his arms shaking with effort. Outside, the sound of claws scraped across the walls. The hunters had followed them. Lyra sank to the floor, clutching her chest, gasping for breath. Her silver glow flickered faintly, like a candle fighting the wind. The man crouched beside her. "Stay with me. You're safe here." But she shook her head weakly. No safe. Never safe. The sound of wood creaking cut through the air. The hunters were testing the barn, pushing against the walls, dragging claws across the planks. Each scrape was a promise. They would not leave until they had her. The man's mind raced. He had no weapons, no plan, nothing but his determination. But when he looked at Lyra, her frightened eyes locked on his, he felt something stronger than fear. He could not let her be taken. Listen, he whispered firmly. I won't let them have you. Do you understand? You're not alone anymore. Her lips trembled. Slowly, she nodded. Family, she whispered. The barn shook suddenly as a hunter slammed against the door. Dust rained from the ceiling, wood cracking under the pressure. The man tightened his grip on the flashlight. His whole body shook, but his voice stayed strong. If they want you, they'll have to go through me. Outside, the hunters hissed in unison, their glowing eyes peering through the cracks in the walls. The sound was not just hunting, it was claiming. They believed she belonged to them. But the man stood tall, ready to fight with everything he had, even if it wasn't enough. The chase had begun, and it would not end until one side was destroyed. The barn creaked under the weight of silence. Dust floated in the air, and the smell of old wood mixed with fear. The man stood near the broken door, his back pressed against it, gripping the heavy beam that kept it closed. Outside, the hunters lingered. Their claws scraped the walls now and then, reminding him that they were still there, waiting, watching. Lyra sat on the dirt floor, her body trembling. Her glow flickered weakly, dim. Than before, she hugged the blanket close, her wide eyes locked on the door as if it might burst open at any moment. They're gone, the man whispered, though he didn't believe his own words. For now. Lyra shook her head. No, gone. Never gone. Her voice was soft, broken, but certain. The man moved closer, kneeling beside her. He could see the fear carved into her thin face, but there was more beneath it. Pain, exhaustion, loneliness that went deeper than hunger. You're safe, he told her gently. As long as I'm here, you're safe. For a moment, she just stared at him. Then her hand reached out, trembling, and touched his arm. Her voice cracked as she whispered a single word. Why? The man blinked. Why what? Her eyes shimmered, wet with tears. Why help me? The question struck him. He had asked himself the same thing since that night at his doorstep. Why hadn't he closed the door? Why hadn't he called for someone else to deal with her? Why had he taken in a starving stranger from another world? He thought for a long moment before answering. Because you needed me. Her lips trembled and she lowered her gaze. For the first time since she arrived, a tear slipped down her cheek, glowing faintly in the dim light. She whispered again, Family. The man swallowed hard. He had lived alone for years. His family was gone, just memories left behind and old photographs. He had convinced himself he didn't need anyone. Yet now, an alien woman from a broken world was calling him family. And deep inside, he realized he wanted to accept it. He placed his hand gently over hers. Yes, family. The hours crawled by. The hunters did not attack again, but their presence pressed against the barn like shadows refusing to leave. Every noise outside made the man flinch, but he stayed close to Lyra. To pass time and keep her calm, he began teaching her more words. He pointed at objects inside the barn, door, roof, wood, light. She repeated them, her voice still fragile but growing steadier. Each word made her smile faintly, as if language itself was a rope pulling her closer to him. At one point, she touched her chest and spoke slowly. Lyra. Then she pointed at him, waiting. He said his name again. She repeated it, this time almost perfectly. The sound of it on her lips felt strange but powerful. Then she said softly, Family. She pointed to both of them. Family. The man felt a warmth stir in his chest despite the fear pressing around them. She had nothing left of her world, nothing but scars and memories. Yet here, in this broken barn, she had chosen to create something new, a bond. As night deepened, Lyra grew restless. She curled against the wall, her body shaking as if haunted by unseen memories. In her sleep, she whispered in her own language, harsh alien sounds the man could not understand. Tears ran down her face as she dreamt. The man moved closer, gently shaking her awake. "Lyra, you're safe. It's only a dream." She opened her eyes, panic flooding them. Then she saw him, and the fear eased. She pressed her forehead against his shoulder, whispering in broken English, "They take all my people. Gone." The man's chest tightened. She wasn't just running from hunters. She was the last of her kind, alone in a universe that wanted to erase her. He wrapped the blanket tighter around her and spoke firmly, "You're not alone anymore. You have me." Her breath trembled, but her hands clutched his shirt tightly. She whispered again, stronger this time, "Family." When morning light finally touched the broken roof, the man stood and checked the door. Fresh scratches marked the wood. The hunters had tested it again during the night. "They'll come back," he said quietly. Lyra stood too, her legs still weak but steadier than before. Her silver glow brightened as she lifted her chin. "Then, we fight." The man turned to her, surprised. Her voice, once fragile, carried strength now. Fear still lived in her eyes, but so did determination. She had lost everything before, but this time she refused to lose again. He nodded slowly. "Yes, we fight." The barn was no fortress, but together they would make it stand. The hunters were relentless, but so was their bond. For the first time since her arrival, the man no longer saw Lyra as only fragile. She was broken, yes, but she was also strong. And together, they were more than survivors. They were family. And when the hunters returned, they would not find a weak stranger. They would find two souls ready to fight for each other. The morning sun did not bring peace. It only revealed the truth. Claw marks covered the barn walls, deep and fresh. The hunters had not given up. They were waiting, patient and silent, like shadows stitched into the forest. The man tightened his grip on a broken wooden beam he had turned into a weapon. His body was tense, his heart pounding, but his eyes were steady. He had made his choice. Lyra stood beside him, her silver glow faint but brighter than before. Though still fragile, there was strength in her gaze now. She no longer looked only like a victim. She looked like someone ready to fight for the bond she had found. "They come," she whispered. He nodded. "Let them." The silence broke with a screech. The barn door shuddered under a heavy blow. Dust rained from the roof. Another strike followed, louder, stronger. The wood groaned, cracking under the force. The man braced the door, holding the beam tight. "Stay back," he shouted. But Lyra stepped forward, her hands trembling, her glow rising brighter. Her voice shook but carried power. "Not back. With you." The man met her eyes. He wanted to argue, to keep her safe behind him, but she was right. They were in this together. The door splintered. A clawed hand tore through the wood. A glowing eye peered inside, burning with hunger. The man swung his beam hard, smashing against the claw. A hiss filled the air as the creature pulled back. But another blow followed, then another. The barn shook with each strike. Finally, the door crashed inward. The hunters stepped inside. Tall, thin, their bodies twisted like shadows made flesh. Their eyes glowed red in the dim light, fixed on Lyra. Their hissing grew louder, a sound like broken glass scraping against stone. Lyra trembled, but she did not step back. She lifted her hand, and for the first time, her silver glow flared brighter, spilling across the barn. The hunters hissed louder, recoiling for a moment. The man felt the heat of it against his skin. He turned to her, shocked. "You can fight them?" Her voice was low, almost ashamed. "Weak, but light still here." The hunters lunged. The man swung his beam with all his strength, smashing into one creature's head. It staggered, but another closed in, claws slicing across his arm. He cried out, but did not fall. Lyra stepped forward, her glow bursting brighter, filling the barn with silver light. The hunters shrieked, covering their eyes, their bodies twisting in pain. She cried out, her voice shaking the air. "Family!" The word echoed, not just in the barn, but in the man's chest. He surged forward, striking again and again, his fear burned away by fury. Together they pushed back against the darkness. One hunter collapsed, its body writhing before dissolving into black ash. Another stumbled out of the barn, hissing in retreat. The last one lunged at Lyra, claws raised high. The man threw himself in front of her. The claws tore across his shoulder, sending fire through his body, but he did not fall. He held his ground, teeth clenched. Then Lyra's glow erupted fully, brighter than the sun breaking through a storm. The hunter shrieked, its body trembling before bursting into ash like the others. Silence followed. The barn was broken, dust swirling in the air, the smell of ash heavy around them. The man sank to his knees, clutching his shoulder, his body weak but alive. Lyra dropped beside him, her hands glowing faintly as she pressed them against his wound. The pain softened, though exhaustion pulled at him. He looked at her, his voice rough. "We did it." Her eyes shimmered with tears. Family. Fight together." He nodded weakly, managing a faint smile. "Yes, together." The hunters were gone, for now. The barn stood broken, the morning sky pale above them. But in the ruins, something stronger than fear remained. Lyra leaned against him, her glow dimming but steady. She had lost her world, her people, everything she once knew. But here, in this strange place, she had found something new. And so had he. For years, the man had lived alone, telling himself he didn't need anyone. But now, he had someone who called him family, not by blood, not by name, but by choice. They sat in silence, the world outside still dangerous, still uncertain. The hunters might return, more might come, but they would not face it alone. The man looked at Lyra, her fragile form resting against his side, her eyes closing in peace. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Not as man and alien, but as family.